Merry Christmas, or Happy Hanukkah, or Kwanzaa, or whatever holiday you choose to celebrate today. I hope you enjoy it. We both abandoned our families to do this video. The book we want to review is A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens.
A classic.
Oh, this is my friend Cara, in case people don't recognize her.
Hi. Yes, a few changes.
Now, I want to point out that I actually did review this book all the way back in 2011. For Christmas of 2011, I reviewed this book. That review sucked, as most of my reviews back then did. I redid it in 2016, and my 2016 review of A Christmas Carol is actually still up, but it's no longer public. It's now marked as unlisted, but I'll leave a link in the description below to where you can check out my 2016 review of A Christmas Carol. Now, A Christmas Carol was published in 1843 and has become arguably one of the most famous Christmas stories of all time, but it's a story that even if you've never read the book, you know what the story of Ebenezer Scrooge, or at least you know that name. Now, I'm ashamed to admit that this is the only Charles Dickens novel I have read so far, but he has also written books like Oliver Twist, Little Dorrit, Bleak House, A Tale of Two Cities, and Great Expectations. So what do you think of A Christmas Carol?
It's a story, no matter how many adaptations, I never get tired of. I love seeing everyone's individual spin on it, how they make the ghosts, how they interpret Scrooge, because Scrooge is such a character to the point where he's become known in English lexicon as a Scrooge. Someone is a Scrooge, you are just a curmudgeon. No holiday spirit can pierce your heart. But I like seeing all the adaptations that I grew up with, especially on like public television, seeing every time how they would do this story. I think the last one I really paid attention to was Jim Carrey's. I love this story so much. It's just, the theme of redemption really gets to me every single time. No matter how old you are, no matter how hardened your heart is by the world and your life and traumas you may have been through, it's just it's a miraculous story. You come to realize through enlightenment that you can change. Anybody can change. And I like that a lot.
Growing up, this was always one of my favorite stories, and I didn't actually read the book until I was like 19. I didn't read the book until I was an adult, basically, but I, of course, grew up knowing about the story from the countless adaptations of the story. I remember in school, in my elementary school, they had these two actors come in, and it was just two people, a man and a woman, but they acted out the entirety of A Christmas Carol for us when we were in elementary school.
Just them.
Yeah.
That's amazing. See, the creativity is just, that's
yeah,
cool.
The guy played Scrooge, and the woman played all three ghosts. And I remember Jacob Marley was a fucking puppet skeleton.
That's cute.
And I don't know if you ever been to the Port Jeff Theater. I think it's Theater 3.
It's on the stage, right? They're
every year they do a performance of A Christmas Carol. I remember in middle school we actually went on a class field trip to Theater 3 in Port Jefferson, and they put on a whole play of A Christmas Carol, and it was amazing. I remember, keep in mind we're going back literally 20 years, but I remember during the scene of with Jacob Marley, you saw like the hands of hell reaching out from under the stage to pull Jacob Marley by his chains back down to hell. Like,
oh, that's amazing. That's just it's such powerful imagery that sticks with you. Like, the chains are, everybody knows, like, you know the past, present, and future spirits, but then you just remember the chains. It's you're weighed down by the choices you made in life. And the hands, that would stick with me too.
Yes.
Spooky. I reread this story every year.
I think it's a book that, because of how famous the story has become, everybody knows about the story, but I feel like not that many people really grasp a lot of the themes that Charles Dickens was going for with this. Especially a lot of the themes of class. You know, class is a big issue in this book, I think, as it is in a lot of Charles Dickens novels.
That's true.
Like, he was a man who I think was very aware of class issues, which probably comes from the fact that I think he actually grew up in poverty, basically.
It makes sense. He was writing for the newspaper, I think, and this came out maybe not as a book, but I think in serialized portions in the newspaper, so he must have understood what it was like to write for a living, and obviously, but like the struggles of writing for a living.
I know his father, when he was a young man, his father was like jailed for, non-payment of taxes, or like he was sent to, I think debtor's jail is what they call it, or
God. That'll affect you for sure. Like, right, a lot of money problems, a lot of the disparity between the poor. Even Marley says, like, were there no poor houses? Like, mocking what Scrooge said about the people that were asking him for donations.
That was actually the Ghost of Christmas Present who said that.
Oh!
I thought you read this every year.
Kill you.
So, the plot of A Christmas Carol is we follow this bitter, angry, curmudgeonly old man named Ebenezer Scrooge, who has just let his bitterness and his greed consume him over the years. And he treats everybody in his life like garbage, especially his employee, Bob Cratchit. And Scrooge runs sort of this accounting firm, which he started with his partner, Jacob Marley, who died 7 years earlier. And Marley was very similar to Scrooge, where he cared more about money and business than he did the people in his life. But one night before Christmas, Scrooge is visited by the ghost of Jacob Marley, who we learn has been condemned to either hell or purgatory because of his greed and his bitterness and his general apathy towards the people around him. And Marley has been given the opportunity to warn Scrooge not to go down the same path as him, and he warns Scrooge that he will be visited by 3 ghosts representing the past, the present, and the possible future. And over the course of the story, we learn why Scrooge became the way he did, and Scrooge learns that he must change his ways, not just to save his own soul, but to also prevent people in his life who he has the opportunity to help from suffering a grim fate as well.
Almost like at a certain point in Scrooge's life, it's like Marley came around at the right time. Like, if you continue with this path, you're going to become like me. So it was a very foreboding warning, and it scared him straight, and then he goes on this journey.
Like I mentioned before, like, the novel deals with a lot of these themes of class issues. I think that's really signified in the scene where Scrooge meets the Ghost of Christmas Present, where obviously the Ghost of Christmas Present shows Scrooge, like, the people he knows and, like, how they celebrate Christmas and what they think of him, but he also shows other people celebrating Christmas, but mainly he shows a lot of poor people, and we see how they celebrate Christmas, but we also see the conditions they live in, where we realize, yeah, not everybody's having a Merry Christmas. Like, they do their best, but yeah, there's a lot of people suffering out there, and a lot of people suffering kind of because of people like Scrooge.
Absolutely.
And this is what the Ghost of Christmas Present is trying to show him. I also think that's really signified in the scene where you see the 2 ghostly children who are hiding under the Ghost of Christmas Present's robe, wanting ignorance. Both of those children, they signify
mankind's, like, folly, which not every interpretation shows, by the way. I only knew about that until I read the book and then saw it in the Jim Carrey adaptation. Gaunt, sickly, and just the 2 dangers of humankind, want and ignorance. Like, in excess, that could be somebody's downfall.
Also thought it was, like, really profound when Scrooge says, "Are they yours?" And the Ghost of Christmas Present just says, "They're man's."
Is so omnipotent that he could represent mankind, but is here for Scrooge. It's creepy. I like what you said before, just jumping off of the poverty line. The poor not having the best Christmas, they're struggling, they've gone through hard times, but with Bob Cratchit's family, no matter what son of theirs or what affliction they have is having a hard time, like, they're still trying to celebrate, they have a turkey, they're living below comfortable means, but they're still celebrating, and they still give thanks to Scrooge, despite him leaving them in that condition, which says a lot about the Cratchit family.
Bob gives thanks to Scrooge. The wife is more like, "Oh, fuck that guy."
Exactly. They're both valid because he's trying to have a good heart and say, you know what, I'm here, I've got a job. And the wife, understandably, is like, well, you could be doing better.
Yeah.
F that guy.
I also just think it's a really good story about redemption, you know, because, like, you see in the parts of the book that are about Scrooge's past, where the Ghost of Christmas Past takes him to the past, we see why Scrooge became the way he did. You know,
Of
like,
course.
it seems like his father was definitely abusive towards him. Like, his father sort of blamed him for his mother's death because his mother died while giving birth to him. It's stupid to, like, blame a kid when lots of women died in childbirth back then.
Yes.
And so, yeah, the father's definitely abusive towards him.
And it is stupid, but like Scrooge's past shows, we see him as a miser and a curmudgeon, and we're like, why is he like this? He sucks. And then we go back through his life, and the pain upon pain upon pain just added up. He didn't know how to deal with it, being blamed for something like that, and it's out of his control. Yeah, he became a miser. He became so attached to his memories, and the hurt was just too much to deal with.
Yeah, we also see some of the mistakes he made, like letting his girlfriend or wife leave him because they just couldn't agree on, like, what paths they were taking. Scrooge wanted to pursue this business career, but didn't really have a lot of time to pursue her or pursue whatever family he could have had with her. And there's a scene in the book that's not in a lot of the adaptations, but there's a scene in the book where the Ghost of Christmas Past shows him his ex-wife or girlfriend with her new family, and, like, he feels a profound sadness knowing that he could have had a family with her.
That is very
Yeah.
devastating.
And there's also, like, I like when Scrooge basically begs the Ghost of Christmas Past, please don't show me this. I don't want to see this.
Like,
you know,
take
like,
it away.
And it makes you think, like, obviously we both know assholes. We've both met people who are probably just complete...
Everyone's got one.
Yeah, well, that too, but we've both met people who are just curmudgeons. Makes you think, you know what? A lot of those people probably have their own reasons for being the way they are.
Of course.
And I think it's a very empathetic book. I think it's very much a book about
putting yourself
showing
in their shoes.
empathy to your fellow man. And
Absolutely. Even when it is hard, and even when people like Scrooge aren't being nice, Bob Cratchit is always like, have a blessed Christmas, Mr. Scrooge, and he's always showing him kindness, and Scrooge doesn't have that. He can't reach Bob on that level. It is about reaching your fellow man, even when they cut you off in traffic and trying to see the best in people.
Well, okay, that's different because
Traffic's different.
Trust me, I've said some horrible things when people cut me off in traffic
I
that
can
I'm not
imagine.
going to repeat.
It's a really relatable story. We all have that pain, we all have to deal with it, but then it's about how we treat people despite the things we've lived through and the regrets we have. And that's why I think it always stuck with me, the sadness of, like, can I change? And he realizes it too late, but then he makes a turnaround.
What do you think of the Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come being portrayed basically as the Grim Reaper?
My favorite.
Yeah.
My favorite.
Oh yeah, growing up he was always my favorite ghost, but like,
Yes.
I do think that's interesting how Charles Dickens chose to portray this character literally as the embodiment of death.
Yes. I do forget how they portray him in the entity in the book, but in every adaptation I've seen, it's been like the hooded figure, Scythe maybe, Grim Reaper. Scrooge could have had many different opportunities and futures, but the life he's led up until now, it's led to this, like, extreme moment of, like, that could be you and no one will care about you.
And it's also could be leading to his death.
Of course.
Or the death of Tiny Tim.
That's
because
right.
if he doesn't pay Bob the money that Bob obviously deserves, Bob might not be able to afford a good doctor for Tiny Tim, and, you know, that could lead to the boy's death. And that's what the whole book is really about. It's about Scrooge realizing where his greed and his bitterness has taken him. And
Yes, his actions have an effect on other people.
Yeah, and it forces Scrooge to actually give a fuck about people, you know, where he didn't for the longest time.
It's true. Whether it be his own heartache that couldn't allow him to love anymore, he sees the effect of a kid who, like Scrooge, he was circumstances beyond his control, but this is something that Scrooge can help with. And
I also like how the book, to go back to Jacob Marley, I like how the book portrays hell. That hell is basically, if you were somebody who never helped somebody in your lifetime, your hell will basically be, you now have to see how people suffer, and you won't be able to help them.
that's karmic retribution at its finest. Right? Wasn't there a part where Scrooge sees Marley leave out the window and then all these spirits are just like passing in the wind?
Yeah.
And that was a really cool image that not a lot of interpretations show, but it's like, right, they're in this floating purgatory, they see all the other lost souls, but they can't affect them. And that's why ghost stories always stuck with me. It's like they're trying to reach the other side and help and assist.
That's really what the book is about. It's about how, because of all these class structures, there's certain groups of people just get cast aside by society. There's been some debate on whether the book is more of a secular kind of Christmas story, or if there are, like, Christian undertones to the story. It's especially surprising for a book written all the way back in the 19th century that honestly could go either way. Yeah, if you wanted to, you could interpret the ghosts of Christmas, past, present, and future, as angels sent from heaven to warn Scrooge. But you could also have a whole other interpretation based on whatever your personal beliefs are. Like, it doesn't really... I think there are Christian undertones, but they're not in your face, if you know what I mean. Especially, honestly, the ghost of Christmas Present, to me, kind of came off as almost more of a pagan god of celebration.
Absolutely. The feast and the banquet and just how his appearance, how jolly he was. They do go over certain themes of iconography, I guess, but without saying the words like hell, I don't think.
Yeah, like you could say Jacob Marley's in hell, but they don't outright say that.
Right. They don't ever outright say that. It's very much implied he made a hell of his own design with all the choices he made, and now he's paying for it in the afterlife with all the chains. The chains bind him, he can't move on from that spot. He's stuck. Mm-hmm. And that's a typical ghost story where they're stuck and they usually need some way to be released.
Yeah.
So, it does play around with that a little bit. There's no heaven per se, but the pagan god of the present kind of showed us what, like, heaven could be like, where you're enjoying the present. There's so much bounty and there's so much, like, benefit of staying in the moment and enjoying it. And that's what Bob does in his family. That's what he did at Fizzywigs when he's, like, having the party is that in the past? No, I think
that is in the past.
Fizziwig was in the past.
Fizziwig was his old boss.
Yeah, that's right.
We didn't even mention Scrooge's nephew.
We didn't. And again, like Bob, his nephew just extends kindness to him. Why don't you spend Christmas with us? Like, that always stuck out to me. Like, no matter Scrooge's attitude, the nephew never let that affect him. And that was, like, again, being in the present, like, you can have your vibe, Uncle Scrooge. I'm going to maintain mine. I just want you to have time with us and have a Merry Christmas. And it was very much about making a heaven for yourself, if you want to call it that. The nephew didn't let any of Scrooge's negativity affect him. He just wanted him to celebrate and feel like a family. That stuck with me too. You get older, you get estranged, and then it just feels religious without being so overt.
Yeah. Well, to me it felt like, honestly, what Christianity should be all about is, like, in my opinion, if God does exist, what he cares about is how we treat each other.
Absolutely.
It's less about, worship in me and, like, and all that. It's, no, how do you treat each other? How do you treat the person who's less fortunate than you? How do you treat the child who's homeless and begging for money? Like, how do you treat that person? To me, if there is a God, or if there is some spiritual force that controls the universe, that's what determines whether we go to hell or not, I think.
I personally believe that too, and it seems like that was a strong theme in the writing. But it's nice that you share your beliefs on that, because no matter what you believe, this story is about just the goodness of, like, people. And I think that if you do believe in a God or a creator, it comes out in this story. Like, we could be better. We could show more compassion, like a loving creator, to our fellow man, especially around the spirit of Christmas. Like, he put a lot of emphasis on this holiday, A Christmas Carol, like, things could be more joyful, and this is what could happen if you choose to let your pain weigh you down and ruin your life, essentially. You'll make a hell for yourself.
I sometimes wonder if Charles Dickens' warning about Christmas Carol was ever really heeded by certain people in power, certain politicians. I'm going to be honest, there are some real-life people who probably could use a visit from Three Ghosts.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah.
But it's a story for the middle class to remind us that even though there are bigger factors like the rich and the poor that we can't always control immediately, we can control our immediate lives.
It's also a Christmas story that gets you to understand, you might be having a great Christmas. A lot of those less fortunate than you might not be having that good of a Christmas. It reminds me of that song. What the hell is that song? that goes Feed the World, where it's like, don't they know it's crazy?
It's called Feed the World.
Oh, is that?
Yeah,
is that
but it's good because...
But literally, the themes of that song are kind of the themes that Charles Dickens was talking about in this.
Absolutely. We made our own version, We Are the World, in America, and then England made Feed the World, where they had all their, famous celebrities. Yeah, that was, I think, a fundraising project, and it was a collaborative effort. That's a very nice message, and that was really prevalent back then that I don't see much now, and I think we could use that hope more than ever. We have to keep the hope somehow, and it always feels possible in the darker months. In dark months, where the northern hemisphere gets dark or whatever, and cold, there's always a festival of lights, right? Because what are we going to do in the dark? We're just going to sit there? We don't have to. We can create lights, we can create festivities, eat seasonal meals with loved ones. We might as well celebrate. And that's what this shows. It isn't always about the presents. It is about, Scrooge had more than enough. He hoarded it away, and it wasn't making him happy. That's the kicker. You can have enough to make sure you're comfortable, but he wasn't satisfied. And he finally realized, I have more than enough, and it made him feel better to give. It doesn't do you well to be miserly. Take care of yourself, but then give to... He was more than able to help Bob Cratchit, and then he did. Because it took him realizing his own life, what have I done? I can extend a hand. It's going to cost me nothing, except my life. So, it's such a great story.
So, of course, the book is now, almost 200 years. Another, 20 years from now, it will be 200 years. So,
that's cool.
The book is well over 100 years old now. And in that time, there have been countless adaptations, from plays to movies to even comic books. Now, of course, I mentioned earlier that the Port Jeff Theater does a production of A Christmas Carol every year. Apparently, Port Jefferson, I don't know if they do it now post-COVID, but I know they used to have a whole Charles Dickens festival in Port Jefferson every year.
They do, and I miss it every year because it's the first weekend and I'm always working, but people will walk the streets in costume, they'll carol, they'll go in and out of restaurants. It's really charming, and it's mainly based around A Christmas Carol. I love it so much.
But yeah, as far as movies go, there have been... God knows how many film adaptations of A Christmas Carol. I'm not going to be able to touch on every single one, because honestly, it's too many.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm going to try to touch on as many as humanly possible. The first adaptation of A Christmas Carol was actually a 5-minute silent short film from 1901 called Scrooge or Marley's Ghost, which is, again, it's only 5 minutes long, which most movies back then were only, within 5 or 10 minutes. There was another adaptation, which is now considered to be lost, in 1908. There was another adaptation in 1910. This adaptation I did see. There was a movie called Scrooge from 1913, which was about 40 minutes long. It had Seymour Hicks as Ebenezer Scrooge, who I think also played Scrooge on stage, and he would go on to play Scrooge in the first sound adaptation of A Christmas Carol in 1935. This version was later released in 1926 as Old Scrooge, but yeah, this version's pretty good. He's visited by the ghost of Jacob Marley, but Jacob Marley takes him through his past, present, and future. It cuts out the other 3 ghosts.
That's different.
So the first feature-length adaptation of A Christmas Carol came out in 1916. It was called The Right to Be Happy. There was actually a 1924 adaptation of Dante's Inferno, which took elements of A Christmas Carol. There was another adaptation in 1938 with Reginald Owen as Scrooge. It's a Wonderful Life. I don't know if you ever saw that, but that does take some elements from A Christmas Carol.
I finally saw it. It's amazing.
Also, you can tell the character of Mr. Potter, the antagonist of It's a Wonderful Life, was definitely, at least loosely, based on Ebenezer Scrooge. I mean, he's definitely a Scrooge archetype. Of course, unlike Scrooge, Mr. Potter never gets a redemption arc in that movie, because really the movie wasn't about Mr. Potter, it was about Jimmy Stewart's character being being shown by the angel how his life affects the lives of all these other people, and how all these other people's lives would be different if he never existed. But again, there are subtle similarities between It's a Wonderful Life and A Christmas Carol.
He just learns to live in the present and appreciate his life.
Also, I'm skipping ahead a few decades, but I always thought the character of Mrs. Deagle from Gremlins was probably based on Mr. Potter from It's a Wonderful Life, but again, much like Mr. Potter, unlike Ebenezer Scrooge from the book, she does not get a redemption arc in that movie. She just gets blasted out a window. There was a 1949 TV special that was actually hosted by Vincent Price, where Vincent Price was reading A Christmas Carol to us, and then it would open up into the story, and in that, Taylor Holmes played Ebenezer Scrooge. You also have the 1951 adaptation of A Christmas Carol with Alistair Sim. This one is also pretty good. I remember seeing this on TV when I was a little kid. This version actually expands upon things a little bit. Like, in this movie, we actually see how Scrooge and Jacob Marley first met, and we get a few more details and insights into exactly why Scrooge became the angry old curmudgeon we know him as. You also had the Mr. Magoo TV special from 1962, I think. One adaptation I do really want to talk about, there was a movie called A Carol for Another Christmas. It was a 1964 TV movie that was actually written by Rod Serling, who of course is the creator of The Twilight Zone. And basically it was all like a Cold War take on A Christmas Carol. It was basically about this guy who's visited by the ghost of Christmas past, present, and future, but the ghost of Christmas past shows him like World War I and World War II. Then the Ghost of Christmas Present shows him refugees of current wars, and then the Ghost of Christmas Future shows him a possible World War III. It was basically an anti-war take on A Christmas Carol. It's a very good movie if you ever get a chance to see it.
I've never heard of it.
Yeah, it's called A Carol for Another Christmas.
And it doesn't even take the same title. That's pretty unique. Yeah, I'd watch that.
You also had the 1970 musical Scrooge. There was also a 1971 animated TV special, which actually won an Oscar for Best Animated Short Film. This one I actually did see when I was a little kid. When you see Wanton Ignorance in the scene where they come out of, like, the president's robe, it's so fucking creepy, and I remember it scaring the shit out of me when I was a little kid.
What version is this?
It's a 1971 animated version. I forgot whether it was on TV or if maybe they were showing it to us in my elementary school, but I just remember being like, what the hell is this? What are those two little ghost children under him? Like, this isn't supposed to happen. My 5-year-old brain could not process it.
That's really young, and also those old animations didn't mess around. They would just happily traumatize you.
There's also Mickey's A Christmas Carol, the Disney version, which had Mickey Mouse as Bob Cratchit, and it had Scrooge McDuck as Ebenezer Scrooge. Now, the character of Scrooge McDuck, who of course existed in Disney media before that movie, he obviously was based on Ebenezer Scrooge.
Of course, pile of money that you dove into and everything, and name is Scrooge.
I do remember seeing Mickey's Christmas Carol when I was a little kid, but I haven't seen it since I was a kid. Have you seen that one?
Yes, I love it. Like, it's goofy, but it hits all the emotional beats. Like, even Mickey Mouse, who is Bob Cratchit, and his son Tiny Tim, which is just another little mouse, like, you still feel the emotional beats. Like, Scrooge is still empathetic. Like, it's very well done. And then you find out at the very end, the Ghost of Christmas Future is like Pete. But it still has the same emotional effect. Like, he's still looking at his own grave, and you're like, what the heck? This is dark.
There was another version from 1984 with George C. Scott as Ebenezer Scrooge. Then there was the 1988 Richard Donner comedy Scrooged with Bill Murray, and that was a really good movie. I actually saw that for the first time a few weeks ago. It was playing at the Cinema Arts Center.
Love that place.
Which, for those of you not from Long Island, that's a theater here on Long Island. And
so great.
Yeah, no, it's a really funny movie, but it surprisingly captures the themes of A Christmas Carol pretty well.
It takes place in, like, what? Like, the 80s or 90s, where everyone's, like, all business-oriented and all yuppie? Yeah, I want to see it. I've only seen snippets in full, and the scene with the Ghost of Christmas Future stuck with me as a kid, because it's, like, gross. It's just gross.
There was also the Muppet Christmas Carol with Michael Caine as Ebenezer Scrooge. No, I'm sorry. Michael Caine.
Michael Caine.
Yeah, you saw that one, right?
I see it every year. It's the best because if somebody posted on like Twitter or Tumblr, Michael Caine plays it straight like he's playing on the West End, but totally disregarding the fact that he's talking to a bunch of Muppets. Like, he is acting as Scrooge as if he is talking to real people, but he is surrounded by fuzz and puppetry. Like, it's brilliant. It's funny, and it hits every single character. His acting is great. I cry every time because the way with the song and his love, it's just wonderful.
Another adaptation that I remember seeing a lot when I was a little kid, there was a 1997 animated musical with Tim Curry voicing Ebenezer Scrooge.
Really?
Oh, you never saw that one?
No.
It's pretty good, at least from what I remember. Keep in mind, I haven't seen it since I was 10 years old, but I remember liking it when I was a kid.
That's awesome. Tim Curry was everywhere. He was great.
Oh yeah, I mean, he was freaking Pennywise the Clown in it. He was Nigel Thornberry, for God's sake.
Yeah, he was great.
Smashing.
Smashing.
He was the devil in Legend. Have you ever saw
so
that?
good. Yeah, I want to.
There's a 1999 made-for-TV version on TNT with Patrick Stewart as Scrooge. Have you ever saw that one?
But I love Patrick Stewart.
Oh, it's great. And Patrick Stewart, he actually played Scrooge in a one-man performance of A Christmas Carol. It was like a one-man performance and live reading of A Christmas Carol. Wow. Because apparently it's a story that Patrick Stewart is really passionate about. But he did this play for I think 10 years on stage, and then in 1999 they did a TV version based on both the book and the play.
That's fascinating. And you mentioned the one you saw when you were younger with the two-man show, or the man and the woman playing just every role. That's amazing, but a one-man show?
Yeah, no, the 1999 version's pretty good, and it's honestly pretty faithful to the book.
Oh, can I bring up one?
Yeah, sure.
Real quick. As a kid, watching a lot of public television and TV programming, A Diva's Christmas Carol, it's so silly. It's like a TLC original. It's Vanessa Williams. It's another modern take. The woman, her name is Ebenezer Scrooge. She's like a star. She's like a famous singer or whatever, and then her agent or whatever is Bob Cratchit. And then just Kathy Griffith is the Ghost of Christmas Past. Like, there's a few cameos, but again, that one just affected me, especially the future, because there is no ghost. It's just the TV turning on, and it's omnipotent, and then she just sees herself, and then you don't get to see a grave. You see, like, a TLC kind of, like, documentary on her whole life. And it was fascinating. I never saw that interpretation before, and I really, spoilers, but it's from, like, 20 years ago. So it was worth a watch. It was goofy and good. I think those parts of it were really good.
There was a 2004 made-for-TV comedy called Carol's Christmas. Basically what this was about, it was about the ghosts of Christmas past, present, and future are going to this one guy, but they get the wrong house. And basically this guy is now seeing his neighbors past, present, and future. Like,
see, that's unique.
Jacob Marley's in it, but they make Jacob Marley sort of a Jamaican stereotype where he's like a Bob Marley caricature, where he's like, I am the ghost of Jacob Marley, Mutton. And I remember the guy was like, wait, well, wasn't Jacob Marley British and white? I remember
they saw an opportunity. Oh, Marley? Bet. And they took it.
I remember liking it, but keep in mind, I was 12 when I saw this, so
different times.
If I watch it now, I might cringe, but I remember it being kind of funny. And then there was the 2009 version from Robert Zemeckis, starring Jim Carrey. You mentioned that already.
Yes, Robert Zemeckis. He did the Polar Express.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was an interesting version. It was very... Art style wasn't my personal favorite, but again, what they did with the Ghost of Christmas Present and the children, they made it very creepy. And Jim Carrey was very good in this role. He just always gives it his all. So it was worth a look if you like the story.
And there have been comic and graphic novel adaptations of A Christmas Carol, but the ones I want to talk about, there are actually two Batman comics that are based on A Christmas Carol. There was one from the 90s. It was written by Jeff Loeb called, it was published in a collection called Haunted Night, but basically it was actually set on Halloween, like it changed the setting to Halloween. Basically in that story, Bruce Wayne was visited by three spirits in the form of Poison Ivy, the Joker, and a Grim Reaper version of Batman, and the whole point of that story was for Bruce Wayne not to completely let Batman consume his life. And they're showing him his past, present, and future. Then there was another graphic novel from 2011, written and illustrated by Lee Bermejo, called Novella, Batman Novella. And in that graphic novel, the ghosts of Christmas, past, present, and future were represented by Catwoman, Superman, and the Joker. And Bob Cratchit and Tiny Tim are literal characters in that comic.
Interesting. Have you read this?
Yeah, I read both of them.
How does that work? The Christmas Carol characters exist in the Batman universe?
Basically, yeah.
Okay.
And basically Batman is in the Scrooge role.
Yeah, well, dude has trauma.
Yeah.
He needs to unpack all of that.
Yeah, both of them are pretty good, honestly, if you're a Batman fan. We're skipping over a lot of other adaptations because...
We don't have 2 hours.
Yeah, again, I can't even tell you how many adaptations there actually were. There've just been way too many to name. And,
it's true. And
just talking about, like, the cultural impact that this novel had in general, I mean, we all know the name Ebenezer Scrooge. Mm-hmm. We all know the name Tiny Tim.
Yes.
I mean, there literally was a singer named Tiny Tim, and he obviously took his name from this book.
Oh, yeah.
And, I mean, Bob Cratchit, he's another iconic character from the book.
God bless us, everyone. We all know where that comes from. Whether it's a trend or people really genuinely want to make a different remake, like, there's a reason why there are so many adaptations of the story.
And to once again touch on the cultural impact of this story, I recently saw Small Things Like These with Cillian Murphy. Great movie. It has nothing to do with A Christmas Carol, except for the fact that in the movie we find out that the main character is a Charles Dickens fan, and there's a flashback to him as a child reading A Christmas Carol. Again, it shows you how this is a story that's still in the public consciousness. So yeah, guys, that was our review of Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. Any final thoughts on the book?
What could I possibly say that I haven't already? Show your kids this.
Yeah.
It's a very worthy story to pass on as a human being. It's a very human story, and it's just cool to see how everybody's imagined it.
Yeah, I would recommend it too. I mean, it's a story we all know. I mean, most people know how it begins, how it ends, but still, check the book out. I mean, even if you know the story already, still, read the damn book. Mm-hmm. And have a great holiday, whatever holiday you celebrate today.
Yes.
And even if you don't celebrate a holiday, I hope you have a very good day.
Bless us, everyone.